SGA, hard drive, takes the bump, spins it home. SGA sets it up, and Nerlens Noel in all kinds of traffic.
Well, everybody, today we are going to talk about a game where every Thunder player seemed to get in on the action. So I figured let's let all of our broadcasters get in on the action today, too. We got a whole crew here for you to break down a 131-103 Thunder win over the San Antonio Spurs in late February at Chesapeake Energy Arena. Crew, this was one of the Thunder's best, most complete performances of the season. 8 guys in double figures. That was a Thunder record. Chris, I want to start with you. Just what stood out to you about this game and the way that the Thunder took advantage of their offensive and defensive capabilities?
Well, when you think about the context, it was a game just after the All-Star break, coming off of a big win against the Denver Nuggets, which they snapped a 7-game losing streak against their Northwest Division foe. And I go back to what Billy Donovan was saying kind of coming out of that All-Star break. It wasn't a matter of changing the identity of this team, but really building off of what they had built up to that point. And considering they had lost to San Antonio about 2 weeks prior in Oklahoma City, this kind of ended up being a big game. San Antonio had played them tough defensively. And after a really rough first quarter, really quarter and a half, they finally snapped out of it and figured out the offense. And it opened up things for everybody throughout the rest of the game. I don't think I've ever seen San Antonio capitulate quite like it did in this game. But this was about maintaining second half momentum and about continuing that momentum to help this team build for the final quarter of the season, which they certainly did.
Yeah, Matt, from a context perspective, can you let us know maybe what was happening with the Thunder around this time of the season?
Yeah, I think they considered themselves upwardly mobile, Nick, in the standings. They were viewing making a run at a home court playoff spot in round one. And at the time, they were 7th, battling with Dallas in that 6-7 position in the Western Conference. Still a distance from Utah and Houston in those rungs that lied in front of them and above. So I think that they recognized that this was an opportunity at home before they were hitting the road after this game to build on what happened a couple of nights prior against the Denver Nuggets. And this was a strange game in the sense that the Thunder shot 51% in the first half, still only led by 6 at halftime because they did a really poor job on their defensive backboard. They were outscored 16-6 in second chance points. It's a 6-point game at halftime without DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge or DeJounte Murray doing anything for San Antonio's offense. So the third quarter, a very different story, Nick. That's where the Thunder really generated some runway for themselves, blew the game open, in fact, with dominance in that quarter.
Well, I have to agree with you, Matt. Also, Fish, you brought up good points about setting the table for what this game meant for both teams. Now, keep in mind, too, along with both of you guys just said, the Spurs were coming off a big win at Utah. So you're right, Matt. They were talking, all right, we can get back into this playoff thing. Thunder trying to get a little bit closer to the 4th, 5th spot, scratching at the door, because I think the Thunder came into that game 34-22. Spurs were 24, maybe 31, somewhere around there. So they're trying to, get in there and continue their 22-year history streak of being in the playoffs. So a lot was at stake here. And Fish, you're right, because you finally got a good win against the Spurs during this season. And they come and beat you at your own place. And you go, you know what, man? You climb up the hill, you get knocked back down, and you're coming off the fumes of a big, game against Denver. Keep in mind, the Thunder had 7 players in double figures. Can you repeat that? How good can you be? And can you be consistently good at this level? That's always tough to do on a night-to-night basis. The big key to this game, I thought, was LaMarcus Aldridge. The defense on him. Now, even though the offense wasn't there in the first half, I was happy to see LaMarcus Aldridge get 8 points. When I looked at that stat sheet at the end of the game, I was happy, because, man, that dude's he has just been a beast of burden on the Thunder over the last couple of seasons. He has 8 points, and you start to get better as the game wears on. Yes, single-digit lead at halftime. You bust it open in the third quarter.
Yeah, Mike, the thing that really stuck out to me, and I love the context that everybody's laying out because that's so important, especially during this time in the season in February, coming out of the All-Star break. You just finished a really tough month in January, but you thrived through it, went through a lot of adversity there. So this is the point in the season where slippage starts to become a thing. And that was a really big storyline that Chris Paul and Coach Donovan really wanted to avoid, was no slippage during this time. And we can't afford that. As a matter of fact, coming out of that All-Star break, it was really a huge message for this team, is that we're not going to fall back. We're not going to let off the gas. We're going to keep our foot down, and we're going to keep building. You saw that in the win against Denver and in this win as well.
We mentioned the big burst by the Thunder in that third quarter, outscoring the Spurs by 19. But I really felt like this game turned at the middle part of the second quarter. Lou Dort had a steal and then finished out in transition. Paris, I want to throw it right back to you. What do you think that play did in terms of boosting the Thunder heading into the halftime locker room?
That was one of the plays, Nick, that I actually wrote down after watching this game, was because that was just a turning point of the buy-in defensively for this team, right? I mean, there was so much offensively happening, 37 really impressive points in that third quarter, but you hold a well-oiled Spurs machine to less than 20 points, that says a lot about your defense. And how many times have we seen in that third quarter guys go up to block shots and then retain possession? That takes not only, a good game plan and being in the right place at the right time, but discipline. And I thought that was really emblematic of what this team was capable of doing on the defensive end in this game.
Well, they held DeJounte Murray scoreless in the game, which spoke volumes about the overall defensive effort. He had come in hot. He was averaging 20-plus over an extended period of time, a couple of weeks. He didn't get a shot to go in the 7 that he tried. I thought he was really minimized by Lou Dort specifically defensively, and that ability to get out in transition allowed Dort 15 in the game, one of the 8 that scored in double figures. So this was an historic game for the Thunder in the context of having 8 in doubles for the first time in franchise history. I thought it was a bit historic for the Spurs as well. This is the first time I've ever seen a Greg Popovich coached team, Nick, let go of the rope, because that team did in the third quarter moving to the fourth. They got totally worn down, and they knew it was not going to be their night, and he pulled the starters. That's a big part of the reason Murray went scoreless, and that DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge had pedestrian numbers by their standards, right around 10 points each.
Mike, this season, third quarters were a bit of a struggle for the Thunder in the first month or so of the year. What stood out to you about this third quarter and the way the Thunder came out of the locker room?
I don't know what you're talking about, Nick. All I know is that this was a game I kind of built my confidence that, okay, they can do it in the third quarter, and I know a lot of was talked about how teams struggle in the first with a start or struggle to finish the game. And you kind of rotate in and out of that throughout the season. And if you're playing against a Spurs team, and you're planning, you got to crack the system. First of all, you got to beat the Spurs system. They pass the ball. They don't like to play in transition. So what do? You want to be able to defend their passing. You want to be able to defend their charges to the rim, get blocks at the rim, get those loose balls like we've already talked about, get out in transition. You do that, and you can do that consistently. Like this game was tied, pretty much close at halftime. But what I really liked is the Thunder shot 50% in the first half still. Even though you're only up 4 points, third quarter, different story. All of a sudden, the energy level comes out. I think, you got guys on the floor like Dort. You got guys on the floor like Nerlens. I call him Big Nerl now because, he's like the big brother who's always back there. Like you start a fight on the floor, I got Big Nerl behind me. He's rim protector. So when you got all that stuff coming together at once, transition defense, loose ball, picking up that change off the floor, and knocking down shots. The Thunder only really made 10 threes. I know that sounds pretty funny to say they only made 10 threes, but they only took 22. You didn't need to because you were doing other things. You were getting out in transition, knocking down free throws. And when you come at a team the way you do, and which I was really surprised that you put the foot down and you didn't let up in that third quarter. In the fourth quarter, you had the starters on the bench getting rest. That was pretty good too as well because the Thunder hadn't had a game like that where they blew somebody out in a long time.
Guys, we've had an opportunity to go back and watch a lot of these games. And I don't want to get too overboard here, but I think we might have the plays of the year for 2 players in this second quarter. First of all, you had Gallinari all of a sudden putting his Space Jam shoes on and having a reverse dunk over LaMarcus Aldridge, which nobody expected. We didn't know where that was coming from, but still maybe a highlight reel play for him. And then maybe one of the most impressive dunks of the year for Nerlens Noel. He had a lot of them, but this one to me really stood out in that second quarter when he just completely wiped away Derek White on a drive on the baseline. And he came all the way from the top of the key and just swatted it away and allowed the Thunder to get into transition. I don't know about you guys, but maybe the two top plays for those guys on the year.
Hold on, Fish. Let me chime in now. Fourth quarter, top play of the year to me was when Adams had the ball behind the back to Schroeder, and he kept running to the rim. Schroeder lobs it back to him. Okay? Yeah, I think that got you beat. I'm just saying.
Hey, Chris, that's a big man's perspective.
Yeah, the one I liked was when Hami slipped out of a screen he was going to set for CP3. And Chris fired him a pass, monster dunk down the middle of the lane. Actually, this sets me up. Guys, all of these videos that we've done have really been able to focus on some highlight performances from individual players, but we haven't really had any 40-point explosions from the Thunder this year. This game was a little bit more resembling of what this Thunder team has done throughout the season. Just pick out one guy and what they did as they had 8 players in double figures that stood out to you in this performance very briefly.
I'll go Chris Paul. He was 1 rebound from a triple-double and recognized that managing the flow of what was going on the offensive end required of him to involve everybody that he did. Abdul Nader was one of the guys in double figures in this game with 10 off the bench. Noel had 10, Schroeder 13, and then all 5 starters in double. So I thought Chris managed the game magnificently, and he was probably most responsible for wearing the Spurs down as the game wore on.
Well, I hate to be the guy that comes up with the correct answer all the time, but my guy is Nerlens Noel. He goes perfect. 5 for 5 from the field, 5 block shots. What does that say for his plus minus? Okay, case closed. Next person, please.
You know what? I'm going to have to go in a different direction. I got to say Lou. He had one of his best performances of his career, and he was a huge energy spark plug for this team on both ends of the floor. And I just really love the fact that when you play this Thunder team, you never know who it's going to come from. And I think having Lou have such a great game like that really showed that you don't know where it's coming from, and it's fun to watch as well.
Paris stole mine, but I can pivot on the fly here, and I will go with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was completely stymied by this San Antonio team in the game prior, just 2 weeks earlier. He didn't have the driving lanes, and he sort of adjusted his game. Still had 22 points, 13 rebounds, kind of able to impact the game in other ways. Got to the free throw line 5 times, and so he was able to sort of make that adjustment from game to game into what San Antonio was trying to close off, which is really the strength of his game in driving to the rim and having those off-balance floaters. But you can't go wrong on any of these picks except for maybe Mike's.
Well, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with this starting 5 that we've got right here, guys. Thanks for joining me, Thunder broadcast team.